Whoa. So while it's not unusual for me to bring cardboard down to the plot, it is quite unusual that there's something actually in the cardboard. And I've got this new tool, this new toy that I think is going to make a really big difference on the plot. So let's open it up. Oh, it's heavy. It's huge, Mark. So we had a brief interlude because you needed to bolt the end onto it. And if you're wondering what it is, this is a broadfork. So I've wanted one of these for a while, and I was looking on Facebook Marketplace and such, but they're not that common in the UK, and I couldn't find one secondhand. So I'm really pleased that the people at Terradix sent me one to try out on the plot, because I think this is going to be a real game changer on the plot. So what it's going to allow me to do is aerate my heavy clay soil that I've been compacting over the last year by walking all over it. So before I make the raised beds that are going to go onto the plot, what I want to do is broad fork the entire site, or each of the beds, and this will just lift the soil, but without turning it. So you're not disturbing the networks in the soil. All you're doing is creating some pockets where the water can drain and the air can get in, and hopefully create a more friable and healthy soil. So let's see how it works. It's pretty heavy. It's a heavy duty bit of kit, I think. Now, clearly this bed is very, very weedy. So the other thing that I think this is going to help do is to enable me to lift out some of these weeds. But let's give it a go. So I watched the videos, stick it in, step on it. Whoa! There we go. I've not got much weight on me. Well, enough. And then lift. Okay. But don't turn. Now imagine, oh, and then try and get it back out. There's a weed come out. There we go. That worked well then. That's a whole dock. Brilliant. Right, let's have another go. When I've seen people using these, it's always on soil that looks really friable already. And you think, well, yeah, that's easy. But this clay soil is not so easy. There we go. Oh. Yeah. Oh, maybe I have to do it like that. It's definitely bringing a lot of soil with it. But it's so wet as well here. I wonder if wet is the best time to do it. But you want to work backwards, of course, because you don't want to be then stepping on it and compacting it more. Maybe I need to go in at a bit more of an angle. And then give it a wiggle. There we go. That's more like it. Wiggle. Yeah, that's better. But look at that. That's going to have took up that whole bit of grass. So clearly that was my first time using a broad fork, and oh my goodness, it really is quite a beast, and it does have some heft to it. So I'm fairly weak, as we've established, but it was fine for me. I think if you're any weaker than me, then just the sort of heaviness of it might be an obstacle. But in terms of kind of getting it in, because you have to sort of step on the bar where the spines are to kind of push it into the ground, it's a little bit slippy, so I kind of guess it depends on your shoes. So you do have to be careful with that, I would say. And I've not got much body weight to push it into the soil. If it was more friable soil, I might have, but mine is this heavy clay, and it incredibly wet from all the flooding. So it wasn't quite a difficult job, but actually I did that whole bed in one go. I was pretty exhausted by the end of it, but I did do it. and I wasn't completely sort of exhausted at the end of it. And actually, the thing that I really liked was, as you know, I have a bad back. And if you were to dig that, if you were to be bent over in that sort of position digging, oh, that would kill me. But this back was fine, absolutely fine, because you're remaining upright. So I thought that was a real plus point of this kind of method. I mean, why do this in the first place? I'm practicing no dig. The trouble is I do have this really heavy clay soil, and it has got compacted over time because the beds are big. I've been walking across them, and this just sorts out that compaction. It allows the ground to sort of get the benefits of the dig in terms of loosening things up, but without the destruction of turning everything over. So you just lift it and then you gently let it down and you move on. So the surface of the soil is still the surface of the soil. You're not bringing up loads of weed seeds either. You're just kind of getting under it and lifting it slightly to create a few air pockets, allow the water and the air to get into the soil. So obviously I'm using the broad fork for a no dig method, but I was interested to see how it would work if you were a digger. And Mark was on the plot and he had quite a section to dig. So I asked him if he'd like to try out the broad fork as well. So yeah, so if you tip it all the way over, that shows how you can use it then for dig. I like how you can get it right down to the bottom, whereas I'm jumping on it. So Mark's having a go at using it for a dig method. So he's kind of doing what I did, but then tipping it over. What's your verdict, Mark? What are you feeling?
So it's good, it's heavy duty, it's tall as well, so it gives me lots of leverage to get the soil up, which is good.
And I didn't feel it was too tall for me.
No, no. It certainly is good. It's double the width of a normal fork, so I'm doing half the work. And
it goes deep as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, much deeper. But because you've got that leverage there, you know, it's easier to dig deeper than it is on a fork. But what I would do with this soil at the moment, because it's quite wet still, I'd either leave it and break it down with a fork a little bit later, or go over it with a rotavator again when it's a little bit more drier.
Yeah. I mean, this is what we're dealing with, isn't it? This is really heavy clay that's been waterlogged all winter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's really got in there, and that's quick. You've done that super quick.
Yeah, 5 minutes. But this is where it's getting really wet down here.
Yeah.
Just to kick it off.
Which breaks it up a bit then as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think I would probably get one of these.
Well, we can share, Mark.
Yeah. To fire it out.
Yeah, hire it to the rest of the plot holders.
Yeah, overall.
They already think I'm mad.
Good.
Good.
Good, good, good.
So there's Mark's verdict. Good, good, good. And yeah, I think for whether you're using it for no dig or for dig, it makes light work, and especially of that heavy clay soil. It'd be really interesting actually to try it on some different kind of soil. And I think what I will do when I clear some of the long beds in the home garden, I'll have a go with it on those as well. I imagine it will be much easier going. So after doing that whole bed with the broad fork, I then had to weed, and actually the broad fork made the weeding a whole lot easier. I got some great roots of dandelion out, very satisfying. But there was also quite a lot of grass that had crept up on from the paths. And just generally, I felt like I wanted a bit more of a blank canvas to start with. So I did cover the bed with cardboard. Now that might seem a little counterintuitive. I've just gone through with the broad fork in order to aerate the soil and let the water get down, and then I've covered it all with cardboard. But actually, I mean, that cardboard will break down quickly. It's already breaking down. It's been on the plot for months and months in a pile. So it just gave me a kind of nice canvas to start with, and then I put the pallet collar raised beds on top of the cardboard, ready to fill. So I just concentrated on one bed. So I put all the beds on so that it would keep the cardboard down. Hopefully it has. And I just did the one that I was going to put the broad beans in. So I got a bag of the rabbit bedding. Well, I leveled the bed out as best that I could. I did have to put an extra kind of plinth of wood under one side because it wasn't very level, because the ends of the bed round down into the moats. But got that fairly level, then put a bag of the rabbit bedding in the bottom and pressed that down, then put my new compost on top, and then directly sowed the broad beans into the bed. There was some warmth to the compost, but I think now that it's spread out on the bed, that will quite quickly cool down and should be okay for the roots of the broad beans. The thing that I'm actually a lot more concerned about is that directly after I'd put those broad beans in, that very night, we had some extreme weather. So the wind came up, we had hail, we had sleet, there was like a layer of sleet and snow over all the beds in the home garden, and then the wind continued right through till last night. So I think what we've got to do is head out on the dog walk and go and see if my broad beans survived. Now, luckily, my second sowing of broad beans, which, if you remember, were continually eaten by mice. So actually, although this is a second sowing, it's got about 3 or 4 other sowings within it. Some of them are still just trying to come up. But actually, there's some quite nice sturdy plants in there. So I have got some replacements if we need them. But let's head down to the plot and see the damage. Well, it's mostly good news. The broad beans look fine. The lettuces look a little worse for wear, but lettuces spring back. I have confidence that the lettuces will be okay. Mark didn't quite fare so well, so he'd also put some of his broad beans in. I don't know if he had hardened them off as much as I had, and unfortunately a few of his have snapped. Luckily, he has a whole load more that he can replace them with. So I think that will be fine too. But yeah, it just goes to show, check the weather, which I didn't do, and don't get fooled. It might be early spring, but there's still plenty of weather. There are quite a lot of people down here today as well, I think, assessing the damage. But yeah, I think yeah, that guy's polytunnel is still up. That poor guy whose polytunnel seems to come down with every storm, still there. So all good, Dorie, all good. Oh, let's get home then, because we've got one final job to do. Yeah, come on, come on. So I mentioned earlier having a go with the broad fork on one of the raised beds in the back garden, and I thought, well, we've got some momentum going, let's just go for it. I've cleared this bed of anything that needed clearing, so there were some brassicas, a few tiny weeds. What's left in here is garlic and a couple of nasturtiums. In fact, there are more coming up just there as well. There's like 3 lone spring onions in a little group, and then my leeks, my poor leeks. And of course, a cutting celery. A bed would not be complete without a cutting celery. Now, obviously, this is an established bed. It had topsoil and compost put into it, but it was a green waste compost that wasn't particularly nutritious, I don't think. And I've mentioned before on the channel that I think these 2 beds should do a lot better than they actually do in terms of the healthiness of the crops and the size of the crops. So what I'd like to do is broad fork the bed to aid aeration and also to combat any compactedness. And then I want to top it with some of my homemade compost and some mulch. And then we can get some more broad beans in. Right, so I'll just move this tulip planter. And this has got grass clippings on. It's had a couple of applications of grass clippings, which is fine. That won't be a problem. So I'm going to try, obviously not to disturb the crops that I'm keeping in here. Let's see how. Ooh. Okay. So I don't think I have to be quite as rough with this. Oh, and look how easy that comes out compared to the clay soil at the plot. But yeah, I think I can be a little bit more gentle than on the plot. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I'm doing it the wrong way around, aren't I? Because I'll be stepping on it. Let's change direction. Try not to step on the spring onions. Oh my God, I love it. This is way easier than on the plot. Look at that. Right, go around the spring onion. So where I'm near the crops, I can just put the fork in and not actually lift. So it's still getting some of that aeration. Loving the word aeration on this week's vlog. Well, that was great. That literally took a minute to do. Really pleased with that. Right, apron on and time to do the messy bit, which is get the compost out of the compost bay. Try not to squash my garlic, but this is quite rough and ready compost, so as I'm spreading it, if there are toothbrush handles and other big sticks and things, I'm just picking those out because they can go back into the compost to continue decomposing. So as a no-dig application of compost, this is just going over the top, and because I've made those holes and in the bed and lifted the soil that's in here, it should mean that the goodness in this goes down and the creatures and the bacterias and stuff that are in the bed existing should come up, and perfect kind of symbiosis. That's the idea. Of course, one of the things with doing this is like, how do you know, well, there's another toothbrush. How do you know you're making a good difference? Theoretically, I could do this one as broad forked and no dig and do something different with that one and compare. However, what I will probably do is just do it all the same, because I do tend to go all in, and I'm going to just trust that Charles Dowding in terms of no dig, Hugh Richards in terms of using the broad fork is a good thing to do and a positive thing to do for the health of this soil and my crops. So it doesn't really matter that there are still some woody bits and it's decomposing, because this is laying on the top, so that won't be a problem. Like if you dug it in and you had woody bits, then that might be robbing nitrogen from the soil, apparently. But if you lay it on top, you don't have that problem. Oh wow, this I think is a mango pip, and it's just cracked open, and look at all the little worms that are inside it. That's pretty cool. Okay, well, under you go, worms. Okay, that looks great. And now the final thing to do is put on some soil conditioner onto the top. I've got this blooming amazing stuff. Now this is an optional step, it's not really necessary, but because that's homemade compost and my compost doesn't get that hot, I think there will be weed seeds in it. And I think this soil conditioner will act as a mulch. It will suppress any weeds that want to come up and help retain moisture, and also it could even deter slugs. We'll see. Two bags is actually made for a really generous application of that mulch or soil enricher onto the bed. Really pleased with that. Yeah, I think you could have even got away with a bag and a half on there. Okay, right, well, it's ready to plant something into now. That's exciting. So as we've established a bit of a theme for this week, using the broad fork, preparing beds and planting out broad beans, I thought, why not put broad beans into this bed? It was my idea that I would only have broad beans on the plot this year, but oh well. So now I have two varieties here. I'm not sure I've got the label. Oh, I have for both. So these are Grano. I think these were from Nick. And these ones are, oh, these are the crimson flowered. And actually I did want those in the home garden because they're so beautiful. So they're almost ornamental. Right, where should I put them in then? Because they will need staking. And how many have we got? Okay, we've got 6 crimson and 7 grano. So if you remember, these were the broad beans that we sowed in toilet rolls, but then also we put the toilet rolls into the cells. It's worked so well. So you can see where the root is and then the toilet roll. And the roots have come right down to the bottom of the cell, but the toilet roll has enabled the plant to stay a little bit more sturdy because it's higher. That's worked really well. I'm really pleased with that. If you don't have these kinds of deep root trainers, then this is a really good way of getting around that. Very pleased. So I've got 6 of one, 7 of the other. I think I'm just going to do 2 rows in between the garlic and the cutting celery, and then that'll leave a space for another crop here, a space there, and then down the other end. And there we go. So they will need staking, but broad beans in. Now I used the plank so as not to compact the bed now that I've uncompacted it. But of course it's suggested now that something could be sown between the broad beans. And actually that's something that I did last year, and I put parsnip seed between the broad beans. But it wasn't a great success because as soon as the broad beans had grown, and they grow quickly, they shaded out the parsnips to such an extent that they really suffered. So if I'm going to put anything in between them, I need really a quick cash crop. So maybe radishes, maybe some of the lettuces. Actually, I have loads of lettuces. Let me know what you think I should put between the broad beans. So a big thank you to Constantin and the folks over at Teradix for sending me a broad fork, and if you're interested, I'll put some details below. That's it for this week, so thank you for watching, and I shall see you next week. There isn't much to it, to be honest. In it goes, out it comes. No, let's not put it like that.